The boy who would one day become known as the Old Man of the Mountain was not born into greatness. Hassan bin Sabbah first opened his eyes in the city of Qom, and later grew up in Ray, a place where rival scholars, merchants, and rulers all fought with words, with daggers, and with shadows. His family was of modest means but of stern piety, and from childhood Hassan was steeped in the arguments of the theologians who crowded the bazaars and mosques. He was quick with words, quicker with questions, and in every gathering his eyes glowed with the hunger of one who wished not merely to listen but to command. Those who knew him as a boy said that he walked with the air of one already chosen for something vast, though no one could have guessed the scale of his destiny. In his youth, Hassan was drawn toward the teachings of the Ismaili missionaries who moved quietly across Persia, carrying with them a doctrine both dangerous and alluring. They spoke of hidden truths, of secret imams, of knowledge that the masses could never comprehend. Hassan, restless and ambitious, drank deeply from these ideas. While other young men sought trade, military service, or poetry, he sharpened his mind like a blade. He memorized verses, studied philosophy, mastered mathematics, and debated tirelessly with anyone bold enough to oppose him. His tongue became as sharp as a dagger, and with each passing year his certainty in his mission grew stronger. But certainty alone did not give him power. The Seljuks ruled the land then, mighty in armies and in faith, their viziers and generals crushing dissent wherever it stirred. For Hassan, there could be no open revolt, no battle standard raised on the field. If he was to challenge such giants, it would be with subtler weapons, secrecy, deception, and an iron will. He became a missionary himself, traveling from town to town under assumed names, spreading the Ismaili cause, winning followers one heart at a time. He had the patience of a spider weaving its web, careful never to draw too much attention until it was too late. It was during these years of wandering that he heard of a fortress perched high in the Elburz Mountains, a place called Alamut. Legend said it had been founded centuries earlier by a king who released an eagle into the sky and built his citadel where it landed. It stood upon a needle of rock, its cliffs dropping sheer on every side, so high that clouds often wrapped around its towers like veils. To most it was impregnable, a place only poets described, but to Hassan it was destiny made stone. He realized that if he could seize Alamut, he would have not just a fortress but a throne above the world, a citadel from which he could command men, spread fear, and defy empires. Through careful planning, secrecy, and sheer patience, Hassan began sending his followers to Alamut disguised as workers, farmers, and servants. Slowly, quietly, they infiltrated the fortress until the day came when Hassan himself arrived, walking through the gates not as an invader but as one whose presence was inevitable. The Seljuk governor who held Alamut found himself suddenly surrounded by men who answered not to him but to Hassan. There was no great battle, no clash of armies, only the slow tightening of a noose until resistance was pointless. In the year 1090, Hassan bin Sabbah raised his banner above the fortress. Alamut was his. From that moment, the mountain fortress became something more than stone. Hassan transformed it into a kingdom of shadows. He rebuilt its walls, stored vast supplies, and turned the cliff paths into death traps for any who dared climb them. He filled its halls with scholars and scribes, for he prized knowledge as much as daggers. Yet even more than a fortress of war, he envisioned it as a fortress of faith, the heart of a movement that would spread terror farther than any army could march. But Hassan knew men were not swayed by words alone. To create warriors who would obey without hesitation, he devised a ritual that would bind them forever. Beneath the fortress, in the hidden valleys of the mountain, he ordered the creation of gardens unlike any in Persia. Streams of wine, milk, and honey flowed through marble channels. Exotic fruits hung from trees imported from distant lands. Music drifted on the air, and maidens dressed in silk and jewels wandered among the flowers. To any eye, it was paradise made real. And in Hassan's hands, paradise became a weapon. Young men chosen for service were drugged with hashish until they drifted into unconsciousness. When they awoke, they found themselves in those gardens, surrounded by pleasures beyond imagination. Servants whispered to them that they were in the very gardens of heaven, that the old man of the mountain had granted them a glimpse of what awaited true believers. After hours, days, or weeks, the youths were drugged again, carried back to their barracks, and awoke to find Hassan himself standing over them. He would ask if they had seen paradise, and when they confessed in awe that they had, he told them that obedience to him was the key to return there forever. From that moment, those men were his fidei, devoted ones, willing to sacrifice their lives without hesitation, for death was no longer an end but a gateway. The first assassinations sent shockwaves through Persia. Seljuk generals who had sworn to crush the Ismailis fell beneath daggers in crowded streets. Viziers who railed against heresy collapsed with blades in their hearts. Always the killings were public, calculated for maximum fear. And when the assassin was captured, he did not flinch. Smiling, he proclaimed that paradise awaited him. This more than the killings themselves spread terror. How could an empire fight an enemy who welcomed death? The Seljuks sent armies again and again into the Elbers, but Alamut mocked them. Its cliffs defied ladders, its narrow passes swallowed soldiers, and its walls turned back catapults. More than once, whole armies withdrew in frustration, leaving Hassan's banner fluttering still against the clouds. It seemed the mountain itself favored him. Stories grew. That arrows turned aside from his body, that storms shielded his fortress, that angels walked his halls. Whether true or not, such tales deepened the terror, and terror was Hassan's sharpest weapon. From his tower, he directed not just killers but scholars. His library grew vast, filled with works of philosophy, astronomy, mathematics, and theology. To outsiders, it was a nest of vipers; to his followers, it was a beacon of hidden truth. He demanded strict discipline, no indulgence, no luxury. He himself lived like an ascetic, eating plain food, wearing simple robes, sleeping on a mat. The paradise garden was for his soldiers, never for him. His austerity gave weight to his words. When he commanded death, none doubted that he believed in it himself. As years passed, the legend of the assassin spread far beyond Persia. Traders carried tales along the Silk Road. Crusaders in the Levant heard whispers of dagger men who could strike at any time. A knight might dine in his hall only to find, on his pillow the next morning, a dagger placed silently while he slept, with a note warning him to change his course. Kings and generals alike trembled at such stories. Some chose to pay tribute rather than risk the wrath of the old man of the mountain. The word, assassin, born from Hashishin, spread into every tongue, reshaped into a symbol of fear. Yet Hassan trusted no one, not even his own family. When his sons disobeyed, he executed them without hesitation, declaring that no one, not even blood, could defy his law. His court was ruled by fear as much as faith, and even his closest lieutenants whispered carefully in his presence, for his eyes seemed to pierce through deceit. He was more ghost than man, a figure who haunted the fortress, appearing rarely, speaking sparingly, yet commanding absolute obedience. The Crusaders soon tasted his power. Lords in Syria and Palestine fell to assassin blades, sometimes in the heart of battle, sometimes in their own chambers. The assassins even struck alliances when it suited them, playing one side against another, ensuring that no great power could ignore them. To the knights of Europe, Hassan became a figure of both fascination and dread. Chroniclers described him as a sorcerer, a master of devils, a man whose reach extended farther than armies. They could not understand how a man with no kingdom of fertile fields, no great legions, could wield such influence. Yet they feared him all the same. In one famous tale, a mighty Seljuk general camped with thousands of men in the valley below Alamut, determined to finally raise the fortress. One morning, he awoke to find a dagger driven into the earth beside his bed, with a note tied to its hilt: "You are in our sight." No guard had seen anyone enter, no sentry had raised alarm. The general fled that very night, his army dissolving in panic. Such was the power of Hassan's unseen hand. Inside the fortress, life took on a rhythm of study, training, and silent dread. Recruits whispered of secret chambers, of stairways twisting endlessly, of sentries who appeared without sound. Every wall seemed alive with eyes. The paradise garden remained the ultimate mystery, spoken of with awe by those who had been chosen, dismissed as legend by those who had not, yet never fully denied. For how else could men walk so calmly to their deaths unless they had truly glimpsed eternity? Hassan himself withdrew more and more into solitude as the years passed. He wrote treatises on leadership, faith, and devotion, his pen scratching deep into parchment late into the night. He ate sparingly, spoke rarely, and appeared to live already halfway between the world of men and the realm of myth. His followers called him master, guide, even prophet. To them, he was more than a man, he was a doorway to paradise. Time, however, spares no one. Hassan grew old, his beard turning white, his body frail, though his eyes still burned with undimmed fire. He prepared carefully for his death, choosing successors, ensuring the movement would endure beyond him. His concern was no longer conquest but legacy. By the time death came in 1124, he was nearly 90, an age astonishing for a man who had lived under constant threat. He died quietly in Alamut, not on a battlefield, not beneath an enemy's blade, but in his own fortress, surrounded by the silence of the mountains. To his disciples, it was as if the mountain itself had fallen silent. Yet his work was not undone. The assassins endured, their legend spreading across centuries. Even when the Mongols under Hulagu finally stormed Alamut in the 13th century, burning the gardens, scattering the library, and crushing the fortress, the shadow of Hassan bin Sabbah lived on. The name assassin remained, carved into every language, every history, every tale of daggers in the dark. From a restless boy in Ray, Hassan had become a figure who defied empires. He had carved his dominion not in soil but in fear, not in cities but in hearts. He had created a paradise to control men, and a fortress to defy kings. He had wielded no armies, yet he bent the course of history. He had become the Old Man of the Mountain, a name that would echo long after the stones of Alamut crumbled into dust. After Hassan's death in 1124, the mountain did not fall silent for long. His disciples and lieutenants carried forward the order with the same discipline he had instilled, each word of his preserved as scripture, each command remembered as law. The fortress of Alamut, perched upon its impossible peak, remained a beacon of both terror and wonder. Even in death, Hassan's shadow ruled the mountains. His successors were careful not to change too much, for the fear surrounding the Old Man of the Mountain was itself a weapon sharper than any dagger. They told the people that Hassan's spirit still walked the corridors, that he whispered from the towers, that his hand guided every blade. Men who had never seen his face still trembled when his name was spoken. The assassins continued their work with ruthless efficiency. Seljuk viziers, Arab princes, Turkish generals, even leaders of the Crusader states, all fell victim to the same invisible hand. No palace was secure, no mosque untouchable, no fortress safe. Sometimes the killings were sudden stabs in the street, a blade flashing and vanishing into a crowd. Other times, the dagger struck within the very heart of an enemy's stronghold. A trusted servant, a guard, a scribe would suddenly reveal himself as one of Hassan's fidei, plunging his blade where no protection was thought necessary. And always, the assassin welcomed death. When captured, he proclaimed paradise as his destination and went to execution with laughter on his lips. Rulers across the Islamic world began to live like hunted animals. The Seljuks, who once commanded the greatest armies of the age, could no longer trust even their own halls. Viziers hired food tasters, soldiers doubled the night watches, and yet the killings continued. In Baghdad, the caliph himself trembled at the rumors that the mountain sect's hand had reached even into his court. Every whisper of dissent, every shadow at a banquet, every servant moving too quietly set off waves of fear. Men began to say that the Old Man of the Mountain could strike anywhere, at any time, with no warning. It was during this time that the assassins encountered the Crusaders more directly. These men from Europe, clad in steel and driven by their own visions of holy war, at first dismissed the sect as a strange Persian cult. But their contempt did not last. Leaders of Crusader states soon found daggers at their throats. In the castles of Antioch and Tripoli, in the courts of Jerusalem, rumors spread that the mountain killers had agents everywhere. Chroniclers from the West carried the stories back to Europe, where the tales grew wilder with each telling. They wrote of gardens filled with rivers of wine and houris, of youths intoxicated with hashish, of blind obedience to the old man who promised them eternal bliss. These tales, distorted and exaggerated, would shape how Europe remembered Hassan for centuries to come. Even kings could not remain untouched. It is said that once, when the great Crusader monarch King Richard Lionheart campaigned in the Levant, he received envoys from the assassins. They warned him not to tread too far into their affairs, reminding him that even a king's crown could not protect him from a dagger in the night. Other tales tell of Crusader lords waking in their tents to find daggers laid upon their pillows while they slept, left as silent reminders that the assassins had come and gone unseen. Whether legend or truth, such stories ensured that the Crusaders feared the assassins more than any Saracen army. But it was not only in blood that Hassan's successors maintained power. They continued to build upon the intellectual foundations he had laid. The library of Alamut swelled with manuscripts copied by tireless scribes, treatises on science, philosophy, medicine, and hidden doctrines. Scholars, whether captured or invited, marveled at the knowledge preserved within those walls. For while the world outside burned with wars of conquest and religion, Alamut stood as both a fortress of daggers and a fortress of books. The Paradise Garden remained central to the sect's power. Generation after generation of youths were led through its gates, intoxicated into visions of heaven, awoken into Hassan's promise, though Hassan himself was long gone. The ritual endured, and so did the loyalty it inspired. Fidei hurled themselves from walls at a word, leapt into enemy ranks without hesitation, slit their own throats to prove devotion. Outsiders whispered that no force could break such men, for they did not fight for gold or glory but for eternity itself. The assassins' influence reached a level that even the mightiest rulers were forced to acknowledge. Some sought to crush them with armies, only to find their generals murdered before the first battle. Others chose the path of diplomacy, sending envoys to Alamut with gifts, negotiating uneasy truces. It became common for ambitious rulers to say, "Better to have the assassins as friends than as enemies." Tribute flowed into the mountain stronghold, enriching a sect that already held men's hearts in chains of fear. Centuries passed, and the legend of Hassan bin Sabbah grew greater than the man himself. The title of Old Man of the Mountain passed to each new leader of Alamut, though none could match the severity and vision of its founder. To the world outside, it seemed as if Hassan had never died, as if he still sat upon his high tower, watching the valleys below with eyes like burning coals, sending forth his fidei at will. His enemies cursed his name, poets wove him into verses, and children whispered it in terror at night. Yet no fortress, no matter how high its walls, can stand forever. In the 13th century, a storm rose from the east, the Mongols under Hulagu Khan. Their armies swept across Persia like wildfire, burning cities, slaughtering millions, crushing dynasties that had stood for centuries. When word came that the Mongols were marching toward the Elburz Mountains, even the assassins trembled. They had faced Seljuks and Crusaders, princes and viziers, but never an enemy like this, ruthless, unstoppable, as merciless as Hassan's own creed. The Mongols besieged Alamut with a ferocity no previous invader had matched. Siege engines hurled stones and fire against the walls, towers groaned under the assault, and the narrow passes filled with blood. For months the fortress resisted, but the Mongols were not deterred by cliffs or avalanches. They pressed on, relentless, until at last the defenses cracked. The fortress that had stood for generations, that had defied empires, finally fell. The Mongols swarmed its halls, burning, looting, destroying. The legendary gardens were trampled, the rivers of honey and milk ran with blood, and the maidens who once enchanted the fidei vanished into slavery or death. Most tragic of all was the library. Hulagu ordered it emptied, and its treasures, centuries of manuscripts, knowledge painstakingly preserved, were cast down into the valley or burned. Scrolls of philosophy and science, treatises of mathematics and astronomy, vanished in smoke and ashes. What remained of Hassan's words was scattered to the winds, and the fortress of Alamut was reduced to rubble. Yet even the Mongols could not erase the memory of Hassan bin Sabbah. Long after Alamut was destroyed, the name of the assassins lived on, carried in stories, in chronicles, in whispered legends. In Europe, the tales grew ever more colorful. Marco Polo, traveling in the East, wrote of the Old Man of the Mountain and his gardens of paradise, of youths drugged and deceived into blind devotion. Whether true or not, these stories became embedded in the imagination of the world. The very word, assassin, entered every tongue, divorced from its origins, transformed into a universal symbol of secret murder. And so Hassan's legacy outlived his fortress, his followers, even the sect itself. He had begun as a restless boy in Ray, consumed with questions and ambition. He had seized a fortress with cunning rather than force, turned fear into an empire, and built paradise itself as a weapon. He had created warriors who feared nothing, not even death, and he had forced kings and caliphs, sultans and crusaders, to bend beneath his shadow. He had died quietly in his mountain chamber, but his myth had grown louder with each passing century. The Old Man of the Mountain became a figure half real, half legend. To some, he was a prophet who revealed hidden truths. To others, a sorcerer who deceived men with illusions. To rulers, he was a curse. To poets, a mystery. To common folk, a monster lurking beyond the mountains. Yet all agreed on one thing: none could ignore him. The world he left behind was forever changed by the echo of his dagger. Even today, centuries after the fall of Alamut, his name lingers. In every story of assassins who strike unseen, in every whisper of secret sects and hidden orders, Hassan bin Sabbah's ghost walks. His fortress may be dust, his gardens long vanished, but the terror he shaped remains immortal. For what Hassan understood, better than kings or conquerors, was that true power is not held in armies or cities, but in the minds of men. And he, the old man of the mountain, carved his dominion not upon earth but upon fear itself. Thus ended the tale of Hassan bin Sabbah, the boy from Ray who built a kingdom of shadows, the master of Alamut whose paradise enslaved souls, the old man whose daggers shaped history. He left behind no empire of borders, no dynasty of kings, no monuments of gold. What he left was a legend sharper than any blade, a story that the world has never forgotten, a whisper that still chills the heart whenever the word assassin is spoken.